Hello friends, hope you're all doing good, staying healthy, staying safe. We in this session we want to cover something as around volume profile. I do share a lot of information in terms of around profiling, etc. And so it's fairly probably important that we cover what volume profile is all about, what in a simplified manner. And so this is intended to be a sort of a quick starter guide to using volume profiles. Okay, and generally, how does it relate to order flow? If you see, we use methods like pivot, volume profile, market profile, etc. to build a narrative, to build a story around the market of how do you want to approach the markets, and your plan around resistances, supports, and areas of to sort of watch out for. And then based on that, you'd use things like order flow, etc. for a more micro level execution, and to time the markets perfectly and to observe market reactions around those levels. So volume profile is a method I use fairly consistently. So we would want to sort of cover around what it is, and sort of see where we go from here. So okay, what is a profile? First of all, profile, if you go by the dictionary definition, it is sort of an outline of something as seen from one side. That is what profile is all about, and that's let's see eventually the essence of market profile or volume profile or anything, right? So typically, if you see, traditional charts are like this, right? You have those time candles, and then you have volumes, plotted against each time candle. So essentially, the volume represents the volume of the candle. We are all used to this chart essentially, so we know candles with high volume, we know candles with low volume, things like that. So each candle's volume is plotted against, so it's sort of a volume with per candle for that time box, which is a 5 minute, 10 minute, hour, whatever it is, right? So this is the traditional way of looking at it. What it does give is a candle wise volume thing, so sort of a time and a candle wise view. But what it this fails to give generally is to understand volume around a price. So eventually I'm not interested, more interested to see what volume has got traded around certain prices, rather than specifically on a candle to candle basis, right? Because if I'm changing the time frame, this information changes to a large extent, the information on your candle wise volume, right? So that is where I think volume profile comes into mind. If you see this chart and this chart, exactly the same chart, same price points, etc., what we have here is, while we have the volume plotted on the low, we also have the volume plotted against price. So this if you see, this is called the profile of the volume. So this is the volume plotted against the price. So that way this information is a more easily, I would say, visually confirming information, where I know volume at different price points rather than volume against a candle basis only. So this clearly tells me that around all this move, most volume has got traded here. We have low volumes here, and we have low volumes up here, right? So we clearly know that this is the most traded volume zone for me to watch out for. Okay, so that's the essence of volume profile. So it plots volume against your price, and not on a time by time basis, but rather on a price basis. So essentially this is a more easier or more familiar visual representation, if I would say. Okay. Now, what are the different types of profile available, and what are the different types of profile we look into? So the first and the most common one that you would see across any charts, even I think the broker charts like Zero, etc., also provide, is that is called as a cumulative profile. Cumulative profile is nothing but the sum of all the candles visible in the chart frame, the volume of it. So if there are 100 candles visible, the total volume of that, cumulative volume of that profile. If there are 50 candles visible, so the total cumulative volume of the profile. So if you zoom in or zoom out, you would sort of see that information, right? Okay, and that is where cumulative profile is all about. Then we have something called as session profile. Session profile is essentially plotting the boxing it within a particular session. So if you see this represents one session, and hence the volume plotted against that session. Similarly, this represents the next day, which is nothing, the session or a day, and the volume against it. So we have the volume being sliced into session wise, rather than displaying the entire volume on one side, right? So this is a session profile essentially. And the third profile that we have is called as a fixed range profile, which is sort of you decide the start date or the starting candle, and you decide the ending candle, and you sort of plot a range on it. Typically we would use it for scenarios like where I want to see the profile of the last swing, things like that. So we use that sort of information in terms of using the fixed range profile. Okay, so these are the three major types of profile that are generally being used. So when we are we are looking at a larger swing context, etc., we tend to look at the cumulative profile of the large move across different let's say across a swing, which could be short term, long term, anything. That is where this is more effective. While when you are planning the day to day trading activity, so when I'm planning tomorrow, I would want to see the profile, recent profile of day before yesterday, day before that. So sort of base this as your plan for the next session, right? So that is how you would use this information. And as I said, fixed ranges, when you're looking at a larger swing and we want to see the swing and a profile, etc., we sort of tend to use the fixed range profile. So these are the typical usage as such of the different profiles. Now key profile values. Okay, so there are three main references. First of all, I'll tell you what we use a common context as HVN and LVN, which is nothing but high volume node and low volume node. So if you see this is, let's say, this is the profile of this session, right? If you have this and then this tapering off, right? So you have this major volume around this middle two areas. So this is called a high volume node, this is called a high volume node, and these are sort of called as low volume node, where the volumes were low. So low volume node, that sort of thing. So generally any higher volume zone is called a high volume node, and a lower volume zone is called low volume node. Then we come to what are the important references sort of in the profile, and this is a session profile, by the way. So we have three main areas to look for. We have the VPOC, which is, if you see, plotted as a red line here. So that indicates the most traded volume for the day or the session or that period. Okay, that is the VPOC. And then we have the value area high, and then we have the value area low. How is the value area plotted? Value area is nothing but the area where 70% of the volume of the day or the session has got traded. So this value area represents 70% of the traded volume for the markets, right? Okay, so this one, the higher end of that value area range is called as value area high, and the lower end is called as value area low. So these are like these. So value area low, the VPOC and VH sort of form your reference, like the different pivot points or any other traditional support resistance that you might want to use. Okay. Quick thing, difference between market profile and volume profile, very common thing. They're generally being used interchangeably. So market profile is uses time as a factor. They will use something called as TPO, time, price, and opportunity, which is essentially plotting different periods of time, which is generally one profile is like a 30-minute period, generally plotting it against the candle and the daily time frame, or the session, as you might say. So it sort of plots the time period plotted across different time of the day, right? That is the TPO thing. So if you see these two charts, one is a market profile chart, one is a volume profile chart, right? So most of the time, generally more time spent in a particular price range is equal to more volume traded most of the time. So generally, in I would say most cases, the the TPO profile or the volume profile would tend to look the same. Okay, generally as a thumb rule, they would tend to look the same. They would not differ much in most cases. Okay, but there are certain scenarios where they do differ, and and that's where I think the advantage and disadvantage of one versus the other comes in. Okay, so a market profile, I feel the advantage is when you're looking at larger swing, larger context, and the larger zones. I think that generally works a bit well, and you gives a very snapshot view picture, etc. Volume profile generally I prefer for one reason, because as I said, generally more time spent is more volume, but it is not always the case. For example, during events or during spikes in a candle, we tend to have larger volumes at certain areas, which may not represent larger time spent, right? So, and then I think that way it gives a bit of an additional context and information. For example, if you see this, this is the TPO for the day. The width of this and width of this is largely similar, not much to choose from. But if you see this, the same day, same candle volume profile, the width of this is significantly less than the width of this, because I know while the time spent here is less, market did trade a lot of volume in this zone. So this zone tomorrow becomes a reference to sort of have a bullish or a bearish bias for me, right? So this information is not very apparent here from a TPO point of view, because TPO profile is sort of a VPOC is much higher, while the actual volume traded is here. So that way, you're able to see that okay, larger volume traded at certain area during spike sector is represented more cleanly in a volume profile chart than a TPO chart or a market profile chart. Okay, and these are the key areas. I will quickly also cover one or two chart sessions for you. For example, if you see this charting is plotted when go charting, of course, and then if you see there we plotted two things here. We plotted the cumulative profile, so I get a view of overall profile for across all these days traded. Essentially, let's say I want to see a profile from for the last let's say 1 month, so I'll just select 1 month. I'll just select 1 month here and sort of see the last profile traded for the last 1 month here, and I get that volume across all those zones. And similarly, I want to sort of also see the day wise volume, which is also visible here, so I know these are the key volume areas traded within a certain day, etc. Right? Okay, so this chart is available as a single volume profile in Go charting, that is there. So there are various platforms that gives you this volume profile charts, etc. The brokers generally tend to give the flat cumulative profile only, which is this, but you don't get the session profile. But let's say somebody like a Go charting will give you the session profile as well, and they give you the fixed range profile and the market profile, etc. as well. So also TradingView has that option, but I strongly recommend trying out Go charting for one reason, because you get the order flow charts, you get the TPO charts here as an additional thing along with the same price package or same package, which is not there on any other platforms at this point. You'd get so especially the web platforms essentially. So there's a fair bit of advantage using this. Additionally, what is there I have seen is the tick charts and the tick profile, so which helps you figure out certain spikes traded, etc., and makes you have a more let's say microscopic or molecular information for different charts traded, different price points traded. So tick profiles are more accurate essentially in representation compared to normal profiles. So that is another advantage that I see. Okay, so how do you use it? So if you go to your indicators, if you go to order flow, you have the market profile and you have the volume profile tick information. So market profile tick, this one, and then you have the volume profile tick. Okay, and then you run through the settings of choosing. For example, in this case, I would just quickly do that. So I've selected the session profile. So session profile is on. I've selected the cumulative profile, which is the sum range of all candles there, and I put the POC on, so it sort of highlights the point of control traded, which is again the most volume traded for each day. So if you see this is the VPOC or the POC for each session, etc. Okay, so now when you want to plan for the next day, typically what you would want to see is where largest volume was traded and where low volumes were traded. So they become your point of reference for the next session. For example, if I'm looking at this chart, I see this is where good volumes were traded, and this becomes an immediate reference to see whether prices is holding below or above this price range for the next session to take a decision basis for us. Okay, similarly, when price breaks out of a range, you'd look for a next HV and etc. for the next potential target range on either side. As such, that's a sort of a thumb rule to look for. Okay, so again, if you look at pure if you the difference is, if you look at let's say if I just switch it off, if I'm looking at pure price charts, every candle looks similar, right? I mean, it's a downtrend, yes, but what are the key points to watch out for? I do not know very clearly. But when I just switch on the volume profile chart, I clearly see areas volumes that have got traded. I see this, and then this is the next volume zone. So I know what are the key areas to look for in the next session from a profile point of view, because a volume denotes the importance of a price point. Okay, and that is a very important thing to note overall. So price sort of is an opportunity or an advertising or whatever you call it, but then volume denotes the importance of a price point. I think we'll end the session here. We have an active Telegram group and also Go Charting as an active Discord forum. Please plug into that if you care, and let's enjoy the discussions together. Thank you so much, guys.